Okay, so I've been wanting to make this video for a while, and honestly, I keep putting it off because I didn't know how to start it without sounding like I'm being dramatic. But I think a lot of us are carrying something that we don't really have a word for. And it's this. You lose a friend not to a fight, not to some big dramatic falling out. Just quietly, and one day you're sitting there scrolling through your phone and you see her name and you think, when did we stop talking? And the weird part is, you don't even know the answer. There was no moment, there was no conversation. It's just off faded. And then you're left holding this feeling that you can't even really explain to people because nothing happened. That's what I want to talk about today because I think it's one of the loneliest feelings and nobody really talks about it. So I feel like that we have this idea that friendships ends dramatically. Like there has to be a betrayal or a big fight or someone does something unforgivable and that's it. And sometimes that does happen. But honestly, in my experience, most friend breakups don't look like that at all. Most of them look like a text you meant to reply to and just didn't. Plans that got canceled once and then again and then nobody rescheduled. Conversations that used to flow so easily starting to feel like a little bit of work. And you notice it. You notice the shift but you don't say anything because what would you even say? Like, hey, do you feel it too? This thing between us that's gotten kind of quiet. You don't say that. You just kind of wait, and she waits too. And weeks pass, and months pass, and at some point you realize neither of us rescheduled, neither of us reach out, and that's and now it's been so long that reaching out feels awkward. So you don't, and that's it. That's the whole story. No villain, no moment, no reason you can hand to someone and say, this is why. Just silence that went on a little too long. I think that's what makes it so hard to grieve. Because how do you grieve something that didn't have an ending? And here's the thing that I don't think we talked about enough. The grief is real. Even without the drama, even without the fight, even when nothing technically happened. The loss is real. And I remember sitting with that feeling once, this kind of dull ache about someone I used to talk to every single day and feeling almost embarrassed by it. Like you're not allowed to be this sad about it because it wasn't a real breakup. There was no incident. She didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. So why does it feel like this? And I think the answer is because you lost someone. Even if the world doesn't have a ceremony for it, even if there's no word for what you are to each other now, you lost someone who knew you. And that's worth grieving. I just want to say that clearly because I think a lot of us have been told either out loud or just by the silence around it that this kind of grief doesn't count. But it does. It absolutely counts. Okay, so now I want to get into the part that I think is actually the most uncomfortable to admit. Because I think a lot of the time, the reason friendship starts to fade is because you started changing. And I want to be really careful here because I don't mean about that as a bad thing at all. But I think when we start to get serious about our lives, like when we start building routines, setting goals, being more intentional about our time and our energy, and who we let into our space, we become a different version of ourselves. And not everyone can follow you there. Not because they are bad people, not because you did anything wrong, but because you're genuinely operating differently now. You go to bed earlier, you're more protective of your mornings. You stop saying yes to the things that drain you. You care more about how you actually feel after spending time with someone. That's growth. That's the work. But I think what nobody tells you is that the growth changes your frequency. And some people who loved you at your old frequency just can't quite reach you at the new one. I think about it like this. You know how when you're in a really focused building season, like a real one, where you are making changes and showing up for yourself, you just naturally become less available for certain things, less available for the 3 hour phone calls that go in circles, less available for the plans that are really just an excuse to complain about the same things for the fourth time, less available for friendships that feel like you're just maintaining them out of habit. And that's not cold. That's not selfish. That's just becoming more conscious about your life. But it can look like pulling away from the outside. And I think that creates a lot of silent distance in friendships where you're not doing anything to hurt anyone, but the gap is growing. And she can feel it, and you can feel it too. And nobody says anything. Here's a question I really want you to sit with for a second. What if the friendship didn't break? It just became incompatible. Because I think those are two very different things. A broken friendship means something went wrong. An incompatible one just means you're in a different places. And that can happen without anyone doing anything wrong. Like maybe she's in a season of going out every weekend, staying up late, processing life through being around people constantly, and you're in a season of going inward, journaling, early mornings, being really intentional about your energy. And neither of those is wrong. They're just different. And sometimes you can love someone and still not be right for each other's lives at their particular moment in time. I think we don't let ourselves believe that. We think love should be enough to hold it together. But honestly, sometimes love looks like wishing someone well from a distance. And that's a hard thing to accept. But I think it's a true one. Okay, can I just, or can we talk about the guilt for a second? Because I think this is the part that actually keeps people stuck the longest. There's the obvious guilt. Should I have reached out more? Was I too focused on myself? Did I let this friendship slip because I was being selfish? And that guilt makes sense. It's uncomfortable, but it's understandable. But then there's this other layer, the guilt of feeling relief. And I think that's the one nobody wants to admit. Because when you realize a friendship has faded, sometimes, not always, but sometimes there's this quiet exhale underneath the grief. This feeling of, oh, like a tension you didn't know you were holding just kind of releases. And then immediately you feel guilty for feeling that. Because what does it mean if you felt relief? Does that mean you didn't care? Does that make you a bad person or a bad friend? No, I really don't think it does. I think relief means something was costing you, and your body knew it even when your mind was still working it out. Something in the dynamic, something in the energy, something in the version of yourself you had to be inside that friendship. It was heavy. And it's okay to acknowledge that. It's not a betrayal, it's honesty. And I think real growth, like the kind that actually changes your life, requires you to be honest about what fills you and what quietly empties you, even when the thing that empties you is someone you love. So here's the thing I really want to say about letting go. Because I think we have this tendency to need a reason, to need a story, to need her to have done something so that we feel justified in moving on. And when there is no reason, when it just faded, sometimes we unconsciously build one. We start remembering the times that she wasn't there, the times she said something a little off, the moments that felt like red flags in retrospect. And we do that because we need to make the ending make sense. But here's what I've learned: you don't have to make her a villain to give yourself permission to move on. You don't need a case against her. You're allowed to say, this person was really important to me. This chapter is over. And I genuinely wish her well. And mean all three of those things at the same time. That's not weakness. That's actually one of the most mature things you can do, because holding on to bitterness about something that just naturally ended, that's the thing that actually keeps you stuck, not the loss, the story you tell about the loss. Okay, so here's the part I really want you to hear if you're in this right now. If your circle has gotten smaller lately, if you feel like you've kind of outgrown some friendships and haven't quite found the new ones yet, if it feels a little lonely in a way that's hard to explain, that feeling, that's the in between. And the in between is real and it's uncomfortable. And it's also not permanent. I genuinely believe that the people who are going to be closest to you in a few years, most of them, you probably haven't really met them yet. Or you've met them, but the timing wasn't right. Or the connection is there, but it hasn't had the chance to deepen it yet. Your people are still coming. And they're coming specifically for who you're becoming, not who you were. Not the version of you that showed up for friendships out of habit or obligation or fear of being alone, but this version, the one that's building something, the one that's being intentional, the one that's doing the quiet, unglamorous work of becoming more herself. That's who they're coming for. So the season of smaller circles isn't you failing at relationships, it's you making room. So I want to say something about this before we wrap up. I think we're taught that the grief and gratitude are opposites. Like you're either sad about something or you're grateful for it. But I don't think that's true. I think you can miss someone and also know that the friendship gave you everything it had to give. I think you can feel the loss and still feel genuinely thankful for what was there. But both of those can be true at the same time. And I think the most peaceful place you can get to with a friendship that ended quietly is just thank you for that chapter. That's it. No bitterness, no case, no story about what went wrong or who failed. Just that season was real. It mattered and it's over now. And that's okay. Not every connection is meant to be a permanent. Some people come in for a reason and some for a season. I know that sounds like something you'd see on a graphic with the sunset behind it. And I'm sorry, but it's just actually just true. So if you're carrying one of these quiet losses right now, if there's something you miss but there's nothing to point to, nothing to explain, no reason you can give, I just want you to know that's real. That grief is real. And you're allowed to feel it. You're also allowed to let it go, not because it didn't matter, but because you do. Because your life, your energy, and your time, they matter. And you can honor what was without holding onto the past, its season. You can love someone from a distance. And you can wish her well and keep moving. And keeping moving isn't betrayal. It's just you showing up for yourself, which is honestly the whole point. Okay, that got a little deep, but I hope it helped even a little. And if you've been through this, a quiet friendship breakup, a friendships that just kind of faded, I really want to know. Leave me a comment, tell me how you handled it or how you're still figuring it out. Because I genuinely read them and I think this is a conversation we should be having more. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself. Bye.